Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to the ACLU of Oklahoma's 2026 legislative preview. Thank you all so much for being here. My name is Megan Lambert. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the legal director for the ACLU of Oklahoma, headquartered here at Oklahoma City. If we could start by having folks introduce themselves in the chat, we would love to know your name, your pronouns, where you're from, and what brought you here today. What are you concerned about, and what motivated you to join us this afternoon? I am filling in for our executive director, Tamaya Cox-Ray, who is currently at the Oklahoma City Council meeting, opposing the federal government's efforts to open up a new ICE detention facility here in Oklahoma City. With that in mind, I do want to take a moment to name the moment that we are in, right? We are seeing federal agents as well as state and local law enforcement kidnap and murder our neighbors. And it is always important to show up for what is right and in protection of our neighbors. And that is just as true, if not more true today than it ever has been. And so we have not only the obligation to show up to protect ourselves and our neighbors, but also to stay informed and to stay engaged. And I really appreciate all of you doing that very thing with us today. We're going to go through and give you all a little information about what to expect from legislative session. You'll see here on the first slide, we have two QR codes. One you can scan to see what bills we are tracking, what bills are of interest to us and the important issues, what bills strengthen or often jeopardize the civil liberties of Oklahomans. So scanning that QR code, you'll get access to our bill tracker, and that will help you stay engaged and informed in real time as we go through legislative session. The second QR code you can scan to receive text alerts so that you do not even have to remember to go to check that tracker. We can text you and let you know when an important deadline is up and who to contact about it. And that will help you not only stay informed, but also stay engaged. So we really appreciate that. And then, so like I said, our policy director will go through and give you an update and let you know what to expect from session. We'll hear updates from other members of our team. And if you have a question, please feel free to put that in the Q&A chat at any time after folks have gone through to give their updates. We will open it up to questions. So thank you all again so much for being here. We have a lot to tackle this session. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to our ever fierce and formidable policy director, Cindy Nguyen. Take it away, Cindy.
Thank you so much, Megan. Hi, everyone. My name is Cindy Nguyen. I am the policy director and in-house lobbyist for the ACLU of Oklahoma. I always say that it's just a really fancy title to say that I get to run around everybody's favorite building, the state capitol, to try to stop some pretty egregious pieces of legislation, which we are going to be talking about today. Before we get started, you can still scan that QR code to see what bills we are tracking right in the top-hand corner. But first, we'll start talking about the agenda and what to expect from this legislative preview. So we just finished with intros. We're going to talk about the legislative landscape and what to expect in the 2026 legislative session. We'll talk about all of the bills that we are facing, some legal updates from Megan, upcoming events from our organizer Carly, and ways to support our work, as well as a Q&A at the end. So as Megan said, if you do have questions, please save it at the very end. You can put it in the Q&A for our team to go through. Of course, we will start talking about all of the priority issues that our organization faces. If you are familiar with legislative session, there are thousands of bills that we have to scan through every single year. This year in 2026, there were over 2,600 bills filed, with many of them continuing to attack our civil rights and liberties, and we are tracking about 200 of them, as you can see in the bill tracker. If you have been following session long enough, you know that none of these attacks are new. Almost all of the language is either recycled or they come from national think tanks outside of Oklahoma, many of which are the Alliance Defending Freedom, the Heritage Foundation, which are the people that are behind Project 2025. So not every single bill we discuss is going to be in the preview today, because there is simply not enough time in the world to go over every single priority issues and every single issue that we are facing. But you can still scan that QR code to see what we're facing in that bill tracker. So you may have already seen several eye-catching bills before session has even begun, but it is important to note that only around 11 to 15% of bills filed actually make it all the way to the governor's desk and becomes law. So many of these bills that are filed, even pre-session, are meant to are meant to be attention-grabbing headlines, and many of them don't even make it very far. And there are going to be several stops along the way that we will be talking about as well. So some priority issues that we will be facing, of course, criminal legal reform, especially when it comes to the death penalty, immigrant rights, especially this year, repro freedoms, to us LGBTQ plus rights, class censorship, religious freedom, as well as voting and elections. So we'll start off with the legislative landscape and what that looks like for the second session of the 60th legislature. It is going to start next Monday, February 2nd, and run all the way until the end of May. This means that all of the bills that were not voted down last year, lucky enough for us, it gets carried over into this year, and we begin right where they left off. In addition, with the 2,600 new bills that were filed this year, Oklahoma continues to be a Republican trifecta, meaning that both chambers of the House and Senate, the office of the governor, as well as the AG, are all Republican. You may also note that we live in a Republican supermajority state. And what that means is that one party has the vote to pass legislation without the usual checks and balances that is built into the government. And we have seen over and over again that the supermajority in the state have voted to suspend rules to pass legislation that should have never been heard in the first place. Speaker Hilbert will be leading the House, and President Pro Tem Paxton will be leading the Senate again. The Speaker, Pro Tem, and committee chairs are all of the bill gatekeepers, so make sure you remember who they are and know their faces, because these are the people that have a lot of power in that building. And much like last year, the House bills will have to pass two committees instead of one, the original committee as well as the oversight committee, before making it to the floor, which can be great news if you are fighting a lot of bills, but also bad news if you have proactive bills that you're working on. So speaking of which are priority bills, we are supporting three fantastic bills this year. So our three priority bills all have to do with criminal legal reform. The first one is our Failure to Protect Bill, SB 1417. If you are not familiar with FTP or Failure to Protect, it unfairly punishes mothers facing domestic violence for failing to control the actions of their abusers in cases of child abuse. Even in the cases when the mother had no knowledge of the abuse and was at work when the abuse occurred, 93% of the people convicted under Failure to Protect have been women, and 1 in 4 of those women convicted of failing to protect their children from another caregiver's abuse received a longer sentence than the person who actually abused their child. So as it is written, SB 1417 will reduce FTP down from a lifetime sentence down to 15 years. It also includes an affirmative defense, which means there will be evidence. If there's evidence, it could negate the criminal liability of that person that is being prosecuted for failure to protect. If they take the steps to try to stop the abuse, if they reported it, or if they were in fear for their life. And then, of course, it is also retroactive for the survivors that are currently incarcerated under this. We will also, again, be pushing for a moratorium on the death penalty for 2 years. Last year, it did pass the committee, but it never made it to the floor. The ACLU has always had a firm stance that capital punishment is cruel, error-prone, and racist. Since 2023, 11 people in our state have been exonerated from death row, and it's about time that we pause executions in Oklahoma. And then lastly, we will also be carrying one of our biggest bills, our pretrial modernization bill. This bill is going to set the process for bail, require timely, meaningful, individualized hearings, and develop a statewide pretrial services program. There are also sections in the bill that is going to speed up preliminary hearings. So we are thrilled to be supporting and throwing our full weight behind these three bills. And then, of course, going more into criminal legal reform, some bills that we are supporting as well. So there are almost over 30 bills that we are supporting when it comes to criminal legal reform. The first having to do with conviction integrity units. So CIUs, or conviction integrity units, are divisions that investigate possible wrongful convictions, which Oklahoma is no stranger to. SB 1370 will have the CIU under the Attorney General. It would also have a revolving fund to make sure that this is well funded. HB 3201 will have the CIU under the Pardon and Parole Board. When talking about the Pardon and Parole Board, there are some bills that will also increase the compensation for the Pardon and Parole Board, as well as make it full-time, because members that are sitting on that board can spend thousands of hours going through applications, and they're simply not getting paid for that time or effort. When it comes to SJR 27 by Senator Goodwin, it is going to be a constitutional amendment that specifies that a tie vote during a clemency hearing under the Pardon and Parole Board does not automatically mean a denial or that somebody gets sentenced to death. And then lastly, when it comes to fines and fees work, we are seeing several bills that will require courts to waive certain criminal fines and fees. When it comes to SB 1450, if somebody makes a consistent payment of 48 months, certain fines and fees should be waived completely. So we are thrilled to be supporting those bills. And then next, when it comes to criminal legal reform, there are further efforts. Every single year, there are efforts to address mandatory minimums when it comes to juveniles. So SB 1607 will prohibit LWOP, or life without parole, for juveniles, and it will also prohibit a mandatory minimum of 20 years or longer. It also requires judges to take into consideration when determining the individualized sentencing for these juveniles. Right now, there are 23 states, including Kansas, Arkansas, and Texas, that have already banned LWOP for juveniles. Our brains are not fully developed until we reach about our mid-20s, and these children do not fully understand the crimes that they are being punished for. So we're happy to support those efforts. We are also seeing many bills having to do with data collection. So Oklahoma doesn't collect data on the average jail stay or racial makeup of its detention centers. It also doesn't track the decisions that are being made by the DA's offices, including the initial charging of crimes, plea agreements, and bail recommendations. So many of these things will mean that there will be more data, so people and organizations like ours can measure the overall impact of the criminal legal system on Oklahomans, many are which vulnerable. And then lastly, you may have heard some of these bills on the news: law enforcement mask bans, as well as requiring law enforcement to identify themselves. So these bills are about transparency, accountability, and public safety. Identification requirements should apply to all law enforcement officers, especially when we have seen individuals use masks to impersonate law enforcement. So those are just some of the bills that we are really happy to see get introduced this legislative session. But again, if you have seen any previews, you know there are a number of bills that we are having to play defense on just because of the sheer amount of bills that are attacking our rights and liberties. Every year, there are attempted rollbacks for State Question 780. If you are not aware, State Question 780 was a state question that was passed in 2016, and it reclassified some property and drug crimes from felonies down to misdemeanors, and it raised the felony larceny limit from $500 to $1,000, meaning that if you stole something worth $1,000, then you would be charged with a felony versus simply stealing something for $500. So every year they attempt to roll this back and try to change that felony larceny limit back down to $500. We are also seeing protest riot bills. So HB 3581 is going to expand the penalties for vandalism of government property, as well as make it a felony to wear a hood or a mask during a protest / a riot. We are also seeing things when it comes to law enforcement. So with HB 2941, it is going to require any first responder, and first responder is also in the law defined as anybody that is administering the lock zone. So it is going to require any first responder treating a person who they believe is experiencing an overdose to also contact law enforcement. There are going to be many reasons a person does not want law enforcement officers to be contacted, especially when it comes to when it has to do with substance use or an overdose. And then lastly, when it comes to housing, House Bill 3131 establishes a statewide continuum of care to monitor and audit homelessness services in operation throughout the state, which receives state funding. We know that access to stable housing reduces trauma and cycles of incarceration, which is why we are placing housing under criminal legal reform. For several years, we have seen the legislature take steps to further criminalize people facing housing insecurity. State funds under this bill is going to be dependent on additional reporting requirements. County commissioners shall be the coordinating authority for homelessness services within their county, and the State Department of Health will be tasked in creating and enforcing new safety standards. So we will be facing bills that are going to further criminalize homelessness in this state. And speaking of which, there are over 30 bills attacking our immigrant rights in our immigrant communities in Oklahoma. So we'll just be going over a handful of them. The first one, as you may have heard, there is a bill, a 287G agreement bill, SB 2013. It is going to require police agencies to join the 287G program or risk losing state funds. So 287G is a partnership between U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, and local and state law enforcement, allowing designated local law enforcement to enforce certain federal immigration laws. So that is probably going to be our priority bill of this session when we are playing defense. And then, of course, we have also seen attacks on nonprofits and NGOs. SB 1554 will prohibit NGOs from knowingly and willingly and recklessly providing services to undocumented immigrants. We are also seeing quite a few bills. The last time I counted was about 8 bills that is targeting in-state tuition for undocumented residents, for undocumented students in Oklahoma. Many of them is going to prohibit access to in-state tuition, with one bill even prohibiting certain institutions from using state funds to provide even scholarships or discounts to certain students. So what many of those bills are going to do is codify federal court rulings that have a limited access to in-state tuition for undocumented students. We know that there are partner organizations that are currently suing the state of Oklahoma over this. We are, again, seeing continued attack on our immigrant communities when it comes to state aid such as Medicaid, SNAP, TANF, WIC. We know that this is a scare tactic for immigrant communities and low-hanging fruit for somebody's reelection campaign, that these bills, at least the bills with the asterisk, also require reporting of undocumented folks who apply for benefits to be reported to ICE. So even before being approved, if an applicant is not, quote, lawfully present in the US, ICE is going to be notified. This includes caregivers who are undocumented but are simply applying for their child who is a citizen to receive those benefits, or children who have citizenship status. And then we also see House Bill 2969. This is a healthcare bill for This is a healthcare bill, again, attacking undocumented immigrants. It is going to require health providers to include an immigration status attestation on every application when making eligibility determinations providing Medicaid. So the person applying for Medicaid or Student Care would be the one having to certify their immigration status. Undocumented immigrants in Oklahoma are already unable to access these benefits. So, like I said at the beginning, this is simply a scare tactic and low-hanging fruit for many politicians that are having to worry about their reelection campaigns. And then we also see attacks on employment. Many e-verification bills, the Hire Oklahoman Acts, another one exempting certain visa holders from even qualifying as employees for tax incentives for businesses as well. And then lastly, with our immigrant rights, we are also seeing things when it comes to property and ownership. Many of these bills prohibit certain entities from owning or controlling property. And I think most worrisome, Senate Joint Resolution 31 will be a constitutional amendment to remove provisions permitting bona fide residents who are not U.S. citizens to own land. So what that bill does, it's simply proposing that constitutional amendment to prohibit non-citizens, but including lawful permanent residents from even purchasing land in Oklahoma. And then lastly, when it comes to driver's licenses, there are going to be some bills that require a citizenship marker on your driver's licenses and requires the Service Oklahoma to verify citizenship before issuing driver's licenses and prohibiting driver's licenses to certain folks in Oklahoma. So moving on to reproductive freedom, there are attacks every single year, whether that is on abortion or sex education, you name it, they have probably tried it in the state. So there are going to be a number of bills in Oklahoma attacking access to abortion. The first one, SJR, or Senate Joint Resolution 34, will be a constitutional amendment to place additional instructions and restrictions related to abortion in the state, which continues to be completely banned except for medical emergencies. HB 3592 is going to codify Governor Kevin Stitt's executive order from last year, which ordered the Oklahoma Healthcare Authority to terminate and refuse to renew any Medicaid contracts to doctors or entities that, quote, perform, refers for, or is affiliated with the performance of abortion not permitted under state law. And then, of course, there are bills having to do with pregnancy centers saying that they cannot provide abortion referrals or medication. They do not do that anyways. And then the last two bills right there allows for the prosecution of the pregnant person, even when it has to do, even going so far as charging them with first-degree murder for obtaining the abortion. And then there are always bills attacking sex ed. If you are not familiar with the Baby Olivia videos, they are factually inaccurate, medically inaccurate videos that show fetal development that is going to be required to be displayed in high schools and elementary and middle schools, or at least K through 12 in Oklahoma. That is going to be essentially anti-abortion videos that is going to be shown to our students. And then lastly, I think the most worrisome of a bill is the healthcare denial bill. The last 2 years, the Senate has actually voted down these bills, and yet they come back every single year. It allows providers to deny care based on conscience alone, not based on religion, but simply conscience. So the providers is not clearly defined. It can be a medical provider, it can be a receptionist that doesn't agree that you are wanting prenatal health care. We have already seen a Tennessee woman who was denied prenatal care by her doctor who objected to it because she was unmarried. So we are seeing the impact of these bills across the nation. Moving on to attacks on queer rights or 2S LGBTQ plus rights. Right now, we are tracking over 15 bills attacking these rights. This year, there seems to be a lot of bills attacking the adoption process. And then also, we are seeing 3 of these bills prohibiting same-sex couples from, or at least one of those bills prohibiting same-sex couples from even adopting or being considered for foster care. 2 of these bills also have to do with potential adoptive parents not being denied eligibility based on their belief that they are not going to affirm the gender identity or sexual orientation of their child, and saying that those type of behaviors are not going to be counted as child abuse. Every year, we continue to see attacks on best practice medical care for trans youth and trans Oklahomans in general. Many of the bills further restricts best practice medical care for trans youth, with at least one of them banning Medicaid coverage for trans youth. And of course, we continue to see attacks on sex education in schools, many of them requiring that students will need parental consent to use different pronouns and different names. And then every year, we continue to see the Parental Bill of Rights and attacks on sex ed. And then lastly, a bill concerning state employees saying that no pronouns should be used in official communication. So nothing in your email signatures or your business cards. So that is SB 1787. We also see every year attacks on class censorship, especially DEI. So there are over 10 bills that we're tracking right now in that legislative tracker that have to do with classrooms in Oklahoma. HB 3761 is going to prohibit public schools and school districts from being members of any association or organization with DEI practices. And then most interestingly, HB 3241 will require the State Department of Education to establish, quote, a character education program. These character education programs include values such as getting married before having children, lifelong marriage, sexual abstinence, respect for religion, patriotism, as well as parental authority. We are also seeing attacks on higher education because if you have seen the news in the past year or so, you know that there are certain higher education institutions in Oklahoma that seem to be in the news quite often for a number of things. And many of this would codify what we are seeing. HB 3134, as well as those 2 down there, would also tie state funding, depending on the choices made by the higher education system. We are also seeing attacks on public libraries, whether that is school public libraries or libraries in general. HB 2978 will place a blanket ban on any, quote, obscene materials from public school libraries. We are also seeing attacks on religious freedom. Some of these bills we have seen in the past that are clearly recycled. So right now we are tracking about over 9 bills attacking religious freedom, many of which have to do with schools. So SB 1738 will once again allow for volunteer chaplains to come into schools to talk to students during school hours. We have seen many of those bills last session as well as the previous session. We are also seeing SB 1422 and HB 3240 being school prayer bills, mandating a period during the school day to be allotted for prayer, as well as reading any religious text. And then SB 1868 also requires the teaching of creationism alongside evolution. So it is very clear that our lawmakers are concerned about certain things in our state and not others. And then lastly, we continue to see anti-Muslim discrimination with HJR 1049 and HJR 1040, which are both constitutional amendments to direct courts making any decisions to not defer to international law or Sharia law. It feels like we are back in 2015 and 2016 with many of these bills. And like I said at the very beginning, many of these bills are simply recycled or copy and paste legislation from model national think tanks. We have also seen direct attacks on many of the agencies in Oklahoma, with SB 1486 being most notable, designating CARE Oklahoma and CARE National, or the Council on American Islamic Relations, as a terrorist organization. If you are familiar with CARE Oklahoma, you know the incredible work that they continue to do in the state, and CARE National as well, defending and protecting the civil rights and liberties of Muslim Oklahomans. And then lastly, we are tracking around over 10 bills attacking the voting and election process. Once again, every year there are attacks on the initiative petition process, which is one of the only ways that Oklahomans can truly voice our opinions on issues is through the initiative petition process. Things like medical marijuana, criminal legal reform, Medicaid expansion happened because voters said that they wanted to, despite what lawmakers decided. So one of the only ways that we can actually make our voices heard in the state continues to have further restrictions placed on them through those 3 Senate bills. And then, of course, more absentee restriction bills, including SB 1879. It restricts who can request an absentee ballot by narrowing the allowed reasons. Many of these allowed reasons would be employed outside of jurisdiction on election day, physical illness, you're a caretaker for somebody with a physical illness, or you are a member or a spouse of the armed forces, or you are currently deployed. If you do not meet any of those allowed reasons, then you could be denied an absentee ballot. HB 2939 also removes the provisions permitting the submission of absentee ballots via fax machine, so making a lot less accessible for Oklahomans. And then lastly, straight from out of the Project 2025 playbook, we are seeing SB 1493 directly impacting students in Oklahoma. It is going to prohibit school and college IDs for voting in this state. So as you can see, there are quite a few bills that we are having to play defense this legislative session. But as Megan said at the very beginning, if you sign up and use that QR code to receive our text alerts, you do not have to spend or have a full-time job tracking all of these bills. You can simply sign up for those text alerts and we will send it directly to your phone to let you know critical opportunities to get involved and who to call during legislative session. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to our lovely and fearless leader with our legal director, Megan Lambert, to talk about some legal updates.
Thank you so much, Cindy. I do not know how you do it, reading all of those bills each session, but I very much appreciate that you do. So thank you so much for making sure we are all on top of it. So as Cindy said, I do have a few legal updates to share with you all. The first is about Burt v. Drummond. So that is our challenge to Oklahoma's classroom censorship law, House Bill 1775. The law restricts conversations around race and gender in Oklahoma classrooms. As written, that applied to all Oklahoma classrooms, K-12 through higher ed. Somewhat recently, the district court certified a few questions to the Oklahoma Supreme Court. The Oklahoma Supreme Court said House Bill 1775 does not apply to university classrooms. And in fact, obviously, us as counsel for plaintiffs is the ACLU, and then also in their filings, the Attorney General's office, and now the federal district court and the Oklahoma Supreme Court have all said House Bill 1775 cannot apply to university classrooms because the First Amendment prohibits the legislature from regulating the content of university classrooms and curricula. So I think that is a very important truth to remember as we go through legislative session and see a lot of those attempted restrictions on higher ed that Cindy mentioned. Where the litigation stands now is that portions of the K-12 provisions banning certain concepts, the portions of that are currently enjoined. We have appealed the court's decision not to enjoin the entire law. And so that appeal is now before the 10th Circuit, and we are arguing that the 10th Circuit should prohibit the state from enforcing any provision of House Bill 1775 while we continue to litigate to ensure that that remains the case, that the state can never enforce any portion of House Bill 1775. Next up is White v. Hess. So this is our bail case where we challenge the conditions of the system of pretrial detention in Canadian County because it lacked any resemblance to what a bail hearing and what the process of setting bail should look like, right? Bail is only to ensure someone's return to court, and in rare circumstances, to detain someone because they pose a threat to the community. And I want to be very clear, while we filed in Canadian County, we could have filed the case against any county in Oklahoma. And that is because folks are routinely relying on cash bail rather than individual assessments of what is required to make sure each individual person returns to court. And we filed because what cash bail was actually doing was creating a system where the folks who were detained pre-trial were in jail simply because they could not afford their bail. It created a system of wealth-based detention. And so we are very excited to share that we have reached a settlement agreement with the Canadian County District Court. And in that agreement, it requires that folks are released earlier. So DAs have less time to file formal charges. It also ensures that anyone detained pre-trial goes before a judge to have their conditions of pretrial release set within 72 hours of arrest. It also requires that the jail provide information to folks about what that bail hearing is and what it should look like the moment they step foot in that jail. And provides them an application for an OIDS attorney in case they cannot afford private counsel. They get that application the moment they step into jail so that that process can start more quickly. It also requires the use of a new bail form. So judges are actually having to write down the decision that they are making and the evidence that they considered when making that decision, that they looked at someone's ability to pay and mark whether or not they intended for that order to detain someone so that we can tell who is supposed to be detained by a judicial order and who is simply detained because they cannot afford to post the bond assigned. We also saw that the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals has used that same new bail form as their guidance for what all state courts should do across Oklahoma when setting conditions of pretrial release. And so this is an enormous step forward in making sure we do not have wealth-based detention in Oklahoma. But as you are hearing, right, like now what was once a very quick, almost administrative proceeding in setting conditions of pretrial release now include evidence and judicial findings and a record. And the piece that we are still missing from those proceedings is the assistance of counsel. So that is part of why our bail modernization bill is so important, because even in a landmark settlement agreement like we have with Canadian County, we are still missing that essential piece of the assistance of counsel. Last is Padres Unidos v. Drummond. So that is our challenge to House Bill 4156. 4156 criminalizes unlawful entry or reentry into Oklahoma. If that sounds a lot like an immigration law, that's because it is. If it sounds odd that that's coming from a state rather than the federal government, again, that is because it is odd. The federal government has exclusive governance over immigration. And so we have challenged the state's unconstitutional and immoral attempt to add on criminal state laws to existing federal immigration law. We were successful in getting this law enjoined. The state cannot enforce it. And of course, the state is appealing that decision. That is before the 10th Circuit, so we are going through that appeal currently. But I do want to emphasize that that injunction remains in place while we continue that appeal. So thank you so much. Those are the updates I have on our litigation, and I will now pass it over to our organizer, Carly, to tell you about her ongoing work. Take it away, Carly.
My name is Carly Heitland. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm an organizer with the ACLU of Oklahoma. Our organizing team is constantly working to support, educate, and mobilize our community. This past year, we held or participated in over 150 events. We continue to work on a plethora of issues, including the fight that is happening at this very moment against an ICE detention facility right here in Oklahoma City. We can only be successful by working together. So one of our major aims is to build our people power by organizing supporters and volunteers to take action in our community and the fight for civil liberties for every person who lives in Oklahoma. To continue this effort, I want to invite you to 2 upcoming events. First, we're hosting an organizer education training that's titled the Power and Purpose Institute. You can find it by scanning that QR code that says Organizer Education Training. It's on February 21st, and it's a free 1-day in-person training in Oklahoma City that's focused on building collective power in a moment where our rights and freedoms are under attack. This training offers a clear starting point for people who are ready to act, eager to learn new skills for organizing their communities. I also want to invite you to our Capitol Advocacy Day on March 12th. At this event, you'll learn about important issues in our state, be given the tools to advocate to your elected officials about the issues you care about, and have the time and opportunity to actually go speak with your senators and representatives. I hope you'll join our community of passionate advocates and attend these 2 trainings. I also help facilitate the Not in My Name committee, the Not in My Name coalition, sorry. And the mission of our group is to raise awareness, educate, and mobilize individuals and groups to take a stand against the use of capital punishment in Oklahoma. Through our efforts, we strive to foster a culture of empathy by validating the humanity of people incarcerated on death row and advocating for their fundamental rights. If you're interested in being a part of the fight to end the death penalty in Oklahoma, you can scan that QR code to sign up for the coalition. As a member, you will gain information about local events, rallies, and petitions, gain a space to organize, and join a network of dedicated individuals who are doing this work alongside you. An important part of our work is fighting for clemency for the folks on the row. And I want to thank everyone on this call and everybody else who fought to help us achieve clemency for Tremaine Wood last November. And now we're continuing this fight for Kendrick Simpson, who's scheduled to be executed on February 12th. A little bit about Kendrick. He's a poet, a father, a grandfather, and a friend. He suffers from severe PTSD that played a large part in the crime he committed. However, his jury did not hear that critical information. He has been on a journey of self-improvement during his time on death row, and he has a life worth living and worth saving. You can scan the toolkit for his advocacy toolkit, that QR code, to learn a little bit more about his case, read some of his poetry, and sign the petition that tells Governor Stitt that we do not want Kendrick Simpson to be executed in our name. If you have any questions about our upcoming events or the Not My Name Coalition, feel free to email me. And with that, I'll pass it over to our outstanding development director, Sarah Jane.
Hello, I am Sarah Jane Delonte. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the development director, as Carly said. I just want to thank you all for joining us today and learning about the imperative work of the ACLU of Oklahoma and what we're doing in the state. We've had so many wins this year, and you may be already aware with some of them. This past year, our organizing team just played a huge role in saving Tremaine Wood's life. Our team did some tremendous advocacy work and ensured that not only the public, but more importantly, the governor knew Tremaine's story, which led to Mr. Wood's clemency. We continue to do this work around Kendrick Simpson. We also were a part of a victory for religious freedom, public education, and church-state separation. We joined in on the lawsuits, Walkie versus Ryan Walters, to fight the Bible mandate. We partnered with Americans United for Separation of Church and States, the national branch of the American Civil Liberties Union, the Freedom from Religion Foundation, and then Oklahoma Appleseed Center for Law and Justice to secure that win. This victory ensures protection of religious freedom of every student and parent in Oklahoma, ensuring the First Amendment principle of separation of church and state is protected. It also ensures that taxpayer dollars are not used to purchase Bibles or Bible-related curriculum. Since Inauguration Day, we have conducted 14 Know Your Rights trainings for immigrant rights. We also have printed Know Your Rights cards in Spanish and Vietnamese to distribute in the community. And there are on our website downloadable immigrant rights information on our website, and that is in 16 languages. We continue to partner with coalitions such as Dream Action Oklahoma and Love Thy Neighbor to host community events, such as the Immigrant Solidarity Allies Training this Sunday. But our work doesn't stop there, and we know it can't stop there, and you know it can't stop there. Every day, I am reminded that what we do is possible because of people like you. And whether you're an individual donor, maybe an organization that provides funding for our work, or even a volunteer, we couldn't power forward without your support. The funding from our constituents is very, very crucial to make it possible for us to file legal actions, be in legislatures and educate our community. So what I'm doing today is I'm inviting you to fight alongside us. I want you to be a part of our people power by joining us as a member of the ACLU. You can scan the QR code or go to the link acluok.org/donate. When you go to that link, choose the become a member option. One thing that I love about the ACLU membership, although it is suggested $35 a year, we try and make that inclusive. So you decide how much you want to pay for a membership in the amount that your pocket allows. We don't want anyone to have a barrier for being part of our work. Right now, it can be easy to be overwhelmed in these uncertain times, and our support really depends on you. A frequent phrase that the ACLU says is when they come for our rights, they've got to get through us, and that us includes you. So I personally thank you for considering being part of the us. We would be honored to have you as part of the fight to create a fair and equitable nation. I'd love to see some hearts pop up, reactions if you are a member. I know quite a few of you on the call personally, and I know that you're a member. So I'd love for you to join in solidarity and let the other people on the call know. With that, I want to pass it over to our fearless leader, Tamaya Cox-Turay, our executive director. As Megan mentioned at the beginning, she was at the city council meeting this morning and she has made it back. So Tamaya, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much for being here. And I'm going to get straight into questions. I have a few remarks, but I just want to get straight into some of your questions. So I think that Megan and Cindy, be prepared to come off mute for some of these questions. I think the first question, though, is to Megan. Specifically, the question is, in White v. Hess, does that only apply to Canadian County?
Great question. Unfortunately, yes. The settlement agreement is only binding on Canadian County, but I do want to emphasize that the bail form that we have submitted as part of our settlement agreement has also been issued by the Oklahoma Court of Criminal Appeals as the statewide guideline of how state district court judges should be determining conditions of pretrial release. So that applies across the state. However, the rest of those wins are limited to Canadian County, and yet another reason why we continue to push for our bail modernization efforts at the legislature.
Thanks, Megan. And I think this is such a great example of how we do our approach of integrated advocacy. A lot of the times our work that happens in the courts informed the work that we're going to do under the dome. And so finding a way to ensure we can even codify the win is really important. The next question is actually going to go to Cindy. And I'm assuming this is in regards to Senate Bill 1250, so Hamilton's bill, but how obscene defined in the book bans regarding libraries, and then who can, I think, access the 18 and over? Is that defined, and then who defined it?
Yes, it is in state statutes. I think that's a pretty simple answer. They're just taking it from what is already in law.
Yeah. So I think one of the not great things, great is a not the word, but what we do know, it's not just about what is in law, it's like how it's enforced and who's going to enforce it. And that's where we see a lot of the times where we get involved is because the enforcement is inaccurate. So even if obscene is defined, and we even have, Supreme Court language about what obscenity is, that does not necessarily mean that the school and or the legislature or who's ever in charge of implementing will enforce it correctly. So that's why we maintain vigilant regarding any type of censorship. Cindy, the other question is, you talked about the law or the bill, excuse me, that's really about the mask that's going to prohibit masks. Would that apply to ICE agents by chance? The law enforcement mask ban?
So it applies to all law enforcement officers because we believe that all law enforcement officers are required to identify themselves and not wear masks when interacting with the public.
Yeah, great question. Thank you. And then I think this is kind of like an advocacy as well as how to get involved question, but how can everyday Oklahomans in Southwest Oklahoma, such as in Lawton and surrounding communities, get assistance from us in regards to House Bill 2259, as the City of Lawton Municipal Court does not follow any of the ability to pay fines and fees assessments under this legislation?
So I think you are spot on, Maya. That is definitely an advocacy and organizing question, but I always recommend folks reaching out to our general email and that will eventually reach its way to our inbox so we can try to get some organization within the community and talk about what that bill is going to mean and the impact of it as well.
Oh, I think that's a great point. And Megan has put in our chat, our legal departments, our intake. So intake at ACLU OK is a great way for us to ensure that we're aware of what is happening. So when there are incidents out there that, of course, we're just not aware of, that is one way that we can learn more about the situation, as well as contact people to get more information. I do believe those are all the questions. So I'm going to give it just about 5 more seconds if anyone else wants to put it in the chat or the Q&A function, any more questions. But if you have any more questions, as said earlier, I'm Tamaya Cox-Ture. I'm the executive director of the ACLU. My pronouns are she and hers. And as you can see from the work that was just laid out for the past almost 60 minutes, is that our team is doing the work. And I say sometimes we do the hard work. In Oklahoma, fighting for civil liberties, unfortunately, is the hard work, but we're also doing the heart work, so the HEART work, where we're talking to communities about what are the impacts and how it's affecting. And I can't let this moment go without just naming where we are in our city, in our state, and in our country. And what we saw this past few days in Minnesota, I know is weighing very heavily on all of our hearts. For those that are civically engaged and for those that truly believe in like what this Constitution is supposed to be about, we know that what we are seeing play out with this federal administration makes it very challenging and challenges us to kind of rethink about what government overreach is looking like and what it looks like to be a good neighbor and all those things. If I can give any glimpse of hope to you all, which is sometimes hard, right? Like we don't have all the answers, is that for you all to know that along with you and along with community leaders and along with other amazing organizations that doing the work, that our commitment has been and will be that the ACLU will continue to be there. So that's the commitment I can make as leading this amazing team. But I am always proud to lead this team that is out there doing the work. And as you can see, it's a lot of the work. So I encourage you to get involved with the ACLU, but regardless of the ACLU, there are so many organizations that are doing such great work. Just getting involved is really important because we are relying on one another when these systems that have been designed to keep us out are not functioning in the way that they need to be, that we are relying on community care. And so that is really what I'm hoping that today is about for you all, is that you are committing to one another, that you're going to make sure you are aware of what is happening under the dome at our legislature. We're holding government officials accountable to the people as they should be. And then most importantly, that we are standing side by side with our neighbors on how we can ensure that we're all receiving the protections of Oklahoma and of this country. So I believe I did see one more question. So give me 1 second to make sure that I've answered all of those questions. Maybe not come through, maybe not. So with that, I want to thank you for joining us for today's legislative preview. I don't want this to be the last time you're reaching out to the ACLU and learning about our work. I hope you will consider joining us at the Capitol. As many bodies as we can have, even at a place that may be as toxic as it is sometimes, it is essential that we bear witness to what's happening, but most importantly, that our legislators and our policymakers are able to see the faces that they're supposed to represent. So with that, I wish you the best of this cold day, but I know that the snow is melting. So for those that are able to get out, hoping you're able to get out safely. And more importantly, we want to make sure that we're always in community with you, so you have the way to get in contact with us. So I do encourage you to get in contact with us as possible. So don't be a stranger. Make sure to reach out to us, follow us on our social media, and go into our website to learn more about our work. And with that, take care, and we'll take care of each other.